Okay, let's just pause for a second and think about the word billionaire.
Right.
When you picture a billionaire who pops into your head, you're probably thinking of a tech mogul in a hoodie, maybe an oil tycoon or, a hedge fund manager screaming into a telephone.
Yeah, someone in a suit. Or at least someone who owns the company that makes the suits.
Exactly. You are almost certainly not picturing a guy sitting in a diner, eating cereal, and complaining about the melts.
No, definitely not. That image usually screams everyman, not financial titan.
But today, we're unpacking a figure who completely defies that categorization. We are talking about someone who, as of 2024, Bloomberg officially added to their billionaire index.
And that's a serious list. That's not just speculation.
Not at all. And he didn't get there with software, he didn't get there with stocks, and he didn't get there with real estate. Well, mostly not real estate. He did it with jokes. We are, of course, talking about Jerry Seinfeld.
It's a remarkable distinction. I mean, there are very few entertainers who cross that 10-figure threshold based purely on their creative output. You have producers, you have studio heads. But for a stand-up comedian, it's arguably unprecedented.
It is. And look, everyone knows the show. Everyone knows the voice. What's the deal with? We all know the observational bits.
Of course.
But our mission for this deep dive is not just to rehatch the puffy shirt or the soup Nazi. We have pulled a massive stack of sources here. Biographical records, financial breakdowns from Forbes and Bloomberg. They get into the nitty-gritty of his syndication deals, deep dives into his car collection, and some very, very heated recent reporting on his political controversies.
And that last part is where the story has really shifted in the last few years. Because for decades, Jerry Seinfeld was the safe comic. He was the guy you could watch with your grandmother. He was the clean guy.
Totally harmless.
And suddenly, he's a lightning rod. He is fighting with college students, he's making headlines about the KKK, and he's getting booed at commencement speeches. It is a massive pivot.
A huge one. So the question we really need to answer today is this. How did the guy who made a career out of observing nothing, laundry, airplane food, waiting in line at the movies, become the wealthiest comedian in history, and why, after 40 years of being universally beloved, is he suddenly at war with the culture that crowned him?
It's a fascinating arc, and if you look closely at the data and the history, it really comes down to three things: precision, control, and honestly, a refusal to compromise on his own reality.
Okay, I want to start with that idea of precision.
Yeah.
Because before the Porsches, before the NBC money, he was just Jerome Allen Seinfeld, born in Brooklyn, April 1954. And digging into his family history, you found something that I think explains a lot about how his brain works.
Yeah, looking at the parents is key here. It really contextualizes the Seinfeld persona.
Yeah.
His father, Common Seinfeld, was a sign painter.
A sign painter. That feels very analog. It feels like a job from a different century.
It is. But think about what sign painting actually entails. It's not abstract expressionism. It is structural. It's about craft.
Like a trade.
Exactly. It's precise. You have a finite amount of space, you have a message to convey, and if you miscalculate the kerning or the spacing, the sign is ruined. You can't just feel it out. You have to plan it. You have to measure it.
So it's technical. It's a system.
Extremely. And Kallman wasn't just a painter. He was a joke collector. He served in World War II, and he literally wrote down jokes he heard in the service. He collected them like specimens.
He curated them.
He curated them. So Jerry grows up in a house where a joke isn't just a funny sound you make at the dinner table. It is a constructed thing. It's a trade, just like painting a sign. It has parts. It has a setup, a punchline. It can be taken apart and put back together.
That makes so much sense regarding his delivery. He's always been obsessed with the syllables of a joke. He talks about how changing doesn't to don't can change the laugh. It's engineering.
Precisely. It's mechanical. He sees a joke as a little machine that produces a laugh. But there is another side to the family tree that I honestly didn't know about until we started digging into these notes. His mother, Betty.
Right. Betty Hosny.
She was of Syrian Jewish descent. Her parents were from Aleppo.
Now, I have to be honest. I think most people, myself included, picture Seinfeld as this quintessential Ashkenazi, Eastern European New York Jew. You know, the bagel and lox, Lower East Side vibe.
Exactly. That's the stereotype that we see in media all the time. But Mizrahi culture Jews from the Middle East is distinct. It's a different heritage, a different history. And if you go deep into the genealogy, specifically his great-grandmother's family, the Dayans, there's a very specific, very bold claim that the family has held on to for generations.
Okay, lay on me.
They claim their ancestry traces back to the Exilarchs.
The Exilarchs. Explain that.
These were the leaders of of the Jewish community in Babylon during the exile. So already we're talking about a lineage of leadership, but the claim goes even further back to the biblical King David.
Wait, King David, like Goliath slayer, Psalms writing King David?
That is the family lore. Now, look, genealogists debate these things endlessly, and verifying a line back to antiquity is almost impossible. But psychologically, it matters. It means he grew up with a sense of what's called royalty, a sense of deeply rooted history. He isn't just a kid from Massapequa, Long Island. In his family's eyes, he's part of a lineage.
That confidence definitely shows up later.
Yeah.
He never seemed desperate, did he? Even as a young comic trying to make it, there was always this posture.
No, he always had a certain posture of, I know what I'm doing. It wasn't arrogance, exactly. It was just supreme self-assurance.
So young Jerry goes to Queens College, graduates in 1976. Now, paint the picture of the comedy scene in 1976. This is the era of Saturday Night Live just starting up. You have John Belushi, you have Richard Pryor. Comedy in the 70s was wild, it was drug-fueled, it was chaotic, it was political.
And very confessional. It was about pain and excess. It was George Carlin talking about the 7 dirty words. It was about pushing boundaries in a very aggressive way.
And Seinfeld looks at all that and says, nah.
He goes the complete opposite direction. He decides early on to be the clean comic. No swearing, no sex jokes, just observation. He treats the stage like a laboratory. He's looking at the architecture of social awkwardness, not his own inner demons.
It's a business decision in a way. He found a niche, the guy who doesn't offend anyone.
And it was a much harder path, I think. It's easy to get a shock laugh. It's much harder to get a laugh from pointing out that the little tab on a soda can is weird.
But it wasn't a straight line to the top. Now I want to talk about the Benson incident. Because for a guy who seems bulletproof, getting fired, and getting fired the way he did, is a big deal.
This is a pivotal moment in his psychology. It's 1980. He lands a recurring role on the sitcom Benson. Do you remember Benson?
Vaguely. Robert Guillaume, right. He was the butler who got his own spinoff.
Yes. So Seinfeld is cast as a character named Frankie. Frankie the mail delivery boy.
Frankie the mail boy. I simply cannot picture Jerry Seinfeld in a mail uniform trying to be a wacky side character. It just doesn't compute.
Well, apparently the writers couldn't really picture it either. He's talked about this a lot. He was trying to force his stand-up routines into the character, and it just wasn't working. The rhythms were all wrong.
It wasn't his material.
It wasn't his material, and it wasn't his control. But the way he got fired is the crucial part. He shows up for a table, literally sitting there with the cast, ready to work, opens the script and starts flipping through it. And Frankie isn't in it. The character is just gone. Poof.
No phone call. No agent saying, hey, Jerry, bad news. No heads up from a producer.
Nothing. He had to walk up to the producers at the table read and ask, excuse me, where's my part? And they just casually said, oh, yeah, you're not in it anymore. We let you go.
That is brutal. That is humiliating. In front of the entire cast.
It is, but that humiliation is the engine of his entire career.
Yes.
He realized right then, if you are an actor in someone else's show, you are disposable. You are a cog in their machine. You are Frankie the mail boy. He decided he never wanted to be Frankie again.
He needed to own the show.
He needed to be the guy writing the script. He needed total creative control.
Control. It always comes back to control with it.
It does. He realized that ownership was the only way to protect his product, which was his very specific, very precise comedy.
So he goes back to stand-up, grinds it out, and then gets the golden ticket. The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, May 1981.
The Gatekeeper. You have to remember, back then, Carson was the only game in town. There was no YouTube, no Netflix specials. If Johnny waved you over to the couch after your set, you were a star. If he didn't, you went back to the clubs.
And Seinfeld went out, did a tight, clean set, probably polished in the millisecond, and he crushed it.
He did. Carson loved him, waved him over, and that was it. That was the seal of approval. He was in.
Which launched him into the big leagues. He became a regular on Letterman. But let's fast forward to 1988. He teams up with Larry David. And this is where the sign painter mentality meets the King David confidence. They pitched the Seinfeld Chronicles.
Which eventually just becomes Seinfeld, to avoid confusion with some other show called The Marshall Chronicles. And the pitch has become Hollywood Legend, a show about nothing.
Which is brilliant marketing, but let's be real, was it actually about nothing?
Not really. It was about everything small. It was about the minutia of daily life that nobody had bothered to put on TV before. The double dip, the close talker, the low talker. These were universal experiences that had never been named.
So it wasn't about nothing. It was about things that were so common they were invisible.
Exactly. But the revolutionary part wasn't the nothing. It was the rule they set in the writer's room. No hubbing, no learning.
That is such a deviation from the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, think about Full House or The Cosby Show or Family Ties. those shows were morality plays. At the end of every episode, the music swells, and someone learns a very important lesson about friendship or honesty.
Exactly. Seinfeld rejected that entirely. It was nihilistic in a funny way. The characters, Jerry, George, Elaine, Kramer, never grew. They never became better people. In fact, if you watch the show chronologically, they arguably became worse human beings as the series went on.
They became more selfish, more petty.
And the audience loved it because it felt honest. Real people don't always learn a lesson. Sometimes they're just jerks.
And the cast chemistry was insane. Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Michael Richards, and Jason Alexander, who was basically playing a caricature of Larry David.
Right, but Seinfeld was the anchor, and this is an interesting statistic. Jerry Seinfeld was the only actor to appear in every single episode of the show.
Really? Even the others missed a few.
Everyone else missed at least one. Elaine wasn't in the pilot. Kramer and George are missing from an episode here or there. Jerry was the constant. He was the eye of the hurricane. He let Kramer slide through the door and George scream about his parents. But Jerry was the stable center that allowed the chaos to happen.
It becomes a juggernaut. By season 3, it's the most watched sitcom on American TV. It is the water cooler show. But we have to talk about the end, because this, to me, is the ultimate baller move. This is the billion-dollar decision.
This is legendary in business schools. It's 1998. The show is #1. NBC is desperate. They want a season 10. They need a season 10.
They're printing money.
They're printing money, and they don't want the machine to stop. So they offer Jerry $110 million.
Let's just pause and do the math here. For a 22-episode season, that is $5 million per episode.
For 22 minutes of content.
In 1998 money, if you adjust that for inflation, we are talking about numbers that rival the GDP of a small island nation. It's an absurd figure.
It was an astronomical offer. Jack Welch, the head of GE, which owned NBC at the time, personally made the offer. He flew out to convince him.
And Seinfeld says no. He walks away. Why? Was he just tired? Was it burnout? I still can't wrap my head around it.
I don't think it was just burnout. I think it goes back to the sign painter's ethics. You don't paint a sloppy sign just because someone pays you extra. He felt they had done everything they could do with these characters. He felt the quality was going to dip if they kept going.
He didn't want to jump the shark.
He was terrified of it. He cared more about the legacy of the product, the joke, than the immediate cash grab. It was about preserving the perfection of the 9 seasons they had already made.
That is incredible discipline. Most people, if you wave a $100 million check in their face, they will dance. They will do a puppet show if you ask them to.
And the irony is, that decision likely made him richer in the long run. By ending it at the absolute peak, the show became iconic. It never jumped the shark. It never had that sad, declining season that so many great shows have. So the syndication value skyrocketed and stayed there. He made $1 billion decision by turning down $100 million.
Oh, absolutely. The cultural ubiquity of this show is insane. I mean, think about the puffy shirt. He donated that to the National Museum of American History. It's next to Archie Bunker's chair and the ruby slippers.
It's a literal museum piece. And remember the Apple Think Different campaign?
The one with Einstein and Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr.?
Yes, the pantheon of 20th century geniuses. When the Seinfeld finale aired, Apple actually recut that commercial specifically to air during the commercial break. They digitally added Jerry Seinfeld into the lineup of geniuses.
No way.
Yes. They put him next to Picasso and Gandhi. That is the level of cultural saturation we are talking about. He wasn't just a comedian, he was an icon of innovation.
Okay, so he walks away from the show.
Yeah.
But the money kept coming. Let's talk about the wealth and the toys.
Yeah.
Because the numbers in these reports are staggering.
They really are. Forbes tracked his earnings pretty consistently. Just from the original run of the show, as an actor and producer, he made about $267 million. That's a lot.
A fortune, by any measure.
But the syndication, the reruns. Bloomberg estimates that those deals selling the rights to cable, to streaming services like Netflix, have brought in over $465 million.
$500 million just from reruns. Just from us watching it on TBS at 11 p.m. for the past 25 years.
Which pushed him into that billionaire status you mentioned. But what I find interesting is what he does with the money. Because he's not buying islands, he's not buying sports teams, he's buying machines.
The cars. The Porsche fixation.
It's borderline pathological. He has an estimated collection of 150 cars, mostly Porsches.
150. Where do you even put them in New York City?
Well, if you're Jerry Seinfeld, you build a $1.4 million garage on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. It's an anonymous-looking building from the outside.
A private garage in Manhattan. That's tighter real estate than the cars themselves. That alone is a huge flex.
It's basically a bat cave. 2 stories, climate-controlled, with living quarters. But look at what he buys. It's not just about bling. It's not about buying the newest, fastest Lamborghini. It's about engineering history.
Give me some examples.
Okay, he has the Porsche 917 that Steve McQueen drove in the movie Le Mans.
Iconic. A piece of film history and racing history.
He has a Porsche 550 Spider. And not just any 550 Spider, it is the same model, same color as the one James Dean died in.
That is a heavy piece of metal to own. That's a little morbid, isn't it?
Or it's about owning mythology, owning the object at the center of a major cultural story. But my favorite story is the Porsche 959.
Okay.
This is a car worth, at the time, $700,000. It was basically a supercar. But when he bought it, it wasn't street legal in the U.S.
Why not?
Because of crash test regulations. Porsche didn't want to crash test it. The U.S. requires you to provide 4 cars to crash to prove they are safe for the road. Porsche only made a handful of these 959s, and they cost a fortune, so they said, no, we are not destroying 4 of them just to sell one to Jerry Seinfeld.
So he buys a car he can't drive. That's the ultimate rich guy problem.
For a while, yes, but he actually worked with Bill Gates, who also bought one to lobby Congress.
They lobbied the government
Car!
for a car.
They did. And they successfully helped pass something called the show or display law. It allows you to import a car for exhibition purposes if it's historically or technologically significant. It basically says, I can own this piece of art, but I can only drive it 2,500 miles a year.
That is supreme influence. Changing federal law so you can drive your toy.
But he does drive them right. He's not just polishing them with a diaper in the garage.
He drives them. Do you remember the 2008 crash in the Hamptons?
Fiat? Vaguely, yeah.
He was in a vintage 1967 Fiat 500, a tiny little car. He was driving to get coffee, actually. The brakes failed as he was coming up to a highway intersection in East Hampton.
Terrifying.
Absolutely. He had to make a split-second decision. He knew he couldn't stop, so he pulled the emergency brake and jerked the wheel to avoid crossing into traffic. The car flipped on its side. He was unhurt, thankfully, but it proves he is out there testing the mechanics of these things. He trusts his ability to handle the machine, even when it fails. Mechanics seems to be the theme. Whether it's the structure of a joke or the engine of a Porsche, he likes things that have rules, that have a system.
He likes systems. He likes things that work. And he likes to understand how they work.
And that brings us to coffee. Because ironically, for the guy who made Monk's Diner famous, he didn't drink coffee for years.
No, that was a late-in-life discovery for him. He said he started drinking on the road, doing stand-up, having it with hotel breakfasts. But once he got into it, he really got into it.
He went full nerd.
He owns an Electra Belle Epoque espresso machine. You should look this thing up. It's a $17,000 piece of equipment. It looks like something from a steampunk novel, all brass and eagles. And he owns a Slayer machine, which is another $8,000 or $9,000.
Good grief.
But listen to how he describes the process. He says he also loves using a simple mocha pot, which is kind of a hassle to use compared to a machine, because he calls it a pleasurable way to waste time.
A pleasurable way to waste time. That is the Seinfeld philosophy in a nutshell, isn't it?
It is. It's about finding joy in the friction of the process, in the ritual.
And that philosophy birthed his next big innovation. Because after Seinfeld, he didn't just retire to his garage. He created comedians in cars getting coffee.
Which, when it came out in 2012, felt so fresh. The internet video space was still kind of evolving, and he just stripped everything away.
I remember him explaining the insight behind it. He asked himself, what am I really sick of? And the answer was talk shows.
He was sick of the desk, the band, the fake enthusiasm, so tell us about your new movie plug. He wanted to capture the conversation comics have after the show. In the car, on the way to the hotel, just 2 guys in a car.
Just coffee, cars, and conversation.
No audience, no band, no agenda other than the conversation itself.
And because he's Seinfeld, he gets the biggest guests on Earth. The Barack Obama episode is surreal.
It is. You have Jerry Seinfeld driving a 1963 Corvette Stingray onto the White House lawn and literally knocking on the window of the Oval Office. It's insane.
And Obama was great in it. He was funny. But the dynamic was fascinating. Usually the president is the alpha in the room. But in that car, Seinfeld was the one critiquing the coffee. He was in charge.
That's the control again. Even with the leader of the free world, Jerry is driving. It's his format, his show, his car. But frankly, this is where we start to see the cracks. Because while Comedians in Cars was a huge hit, his recent work hasn't landed the same way. We have to talk about Unfrosted.
Oh boy. The Pop-Tart movie. Released in 2024, his directorial debut.
And the critics were, let's just say, unkind.
IndieWire called it stale in a movie about nothing. And they meant that as an insult this time.
It felt like a movie from 1997 that was released in 2024. It was silly, it was goofy, it was light, and maybe that was the problem. The culture has gotten very serious, and Seinfeld is still trying to be silly. His timing was off.
I think that's exactly it. And that disconnect segues us into the controversy. Because Seinfeld isn't just making movies that feel dated. He's actively fighting with the culture.
But before we get to the politics, we should probably touch on his personal life, because that was really the first time the public really side-eyed him. This goes back to the 90s, at the peak of his fame.
It's a Shoshana-Lonstein relationship.
All right, this was 1993. He's 39 years old. He is the undisputed king of TV. She is 17, a high school student.
They met in Central Park. Even in the 90s, which was a different time, a looser time, the press hammered him for this. Spy magazine called him a little league groom. It was not a good look.
And it lasted 4 years. It wasn't just a fling. She eventually ended it because of the relentless press coverage and, honestly, just being 21 and wanting to live her life in New York while he was living this very insulated Hollywood existence. But it showed a certain blindness to social norms, or maybe just a disregard for them.
You wanted who he wanted, and he didn't seem to care what the optics were.
Which is a pattern. And then he marries Jessica Sklar in 1999. And that wasn't exactly a fairy tale beginning either.
No, that was messy.
They met at a Reebok sports club. The issue was Jessica had just returned from her 3-week honeymoon with her first husband.
Just returned. Like the suitcases were still packed.
Basically. The story is they met, she went on this honeymoon, came back, and then the relationship with Jerry started.
Oof. That's a tough look for everyone involved.
She divorced the first husband 2 months later and married Jerry by December of that same year. It was a whirlwind. And again, the press went crazy, but to be fair to them, they've been together ever since.
That's true. Over 2 decades.
They have 3 kids. They bought Billy Joel's house in Amagansett for $32 million. They run the Good Plus Foundation, which fights family poverty. By all accounts, they seem incredibly stable now. But it was a rocky start in the public eye.
So on paper, he's got the perfect life. The billions, the family, the cars, the legacy. But the last few years, things have shifted. The culture wars have come for Jerry Seinfeld.
Or perhaps Jerry Seinfeld has decided to engage in the culture wars. It's a bit of both.
It started with the PC debate. He stopped playing colleges.
Years ago, he mentioned that college students were too easily offended. They couldn't take a joke. He called it PC culture.
Which is a common complaint from comedians of his generation. Chris Rock says it, Dave Chappelle says it. It's almost a rite of passage for an older comic to complain about the youth.
True. But Seinfeld took it a step further in a 2024 New Yorker interview. He explicitly blamed the extreme left and committees for the death of TV comedy. He basically said you can't make Seinfeld or All in the Family anymore because everyone is worried about offending someone.
Which triggered a huge backlash. People pointed out that It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is way more offensive than Seinfeld ever was, and has been on air for like 16 seasons. The argument doesn't really track.
Exactly. The argument didn't really hold water. And interestingly, Seinfeld actually walked that back. He seemed to realize he'd overstepped.
He did. I missed that.
He went on a podcast later, Tom Papa's podcast, I believe, and he apologized. He admitted he sounded like an old man yelling at clouds. He said, "It's not my business to judge the culture," and that the extreme left hasn't inhibited comedy. It was a rare moment of public self-correction for him.
So he backed down on the comedy debate, but he did not back down on the geopolitical debate.
No. The conflict in Israel and Gaza changed everything for him.
Now, Seinfeld has always been proud of his Jewish heritage, but he wasn't really a political guy. You didn't see him at rallies or making statements.
Not publicly. He was very private about it. But after October 7th, he went all in. He visited the Abducted and Missing Families Forum in 2023. He expressed very strong, unequivocal support for Israel online and in person.
And the reaction from the progressive left was immediate and intense.
It was. The most visible moment was in May 2024. He was the commencement speaker at Duke University.
I saw the clips. It was all over social media. You have students booing, walking out, waving Palestinian flags while he's standing there in his cap and gown trying to give a speech.
And Seinfeld, who for 40 years has been used to universal adoration, suddenly found himself on a stage where a significant portion of the audience viewed him as a villain. That has to be jarring.
And he's been heckled at his shows, too. In Sydney and Melbourne, protesters interrupted his sets.
His response to the hecklers was very Seinfeld, though. He mocked them. He used sarcasm. He said, "You've come to the right place for a political conversation, a comedy show." He was trying to use his old tools observation and sarcasm to deflect a very new kind of criticism.
But the moment that went viral, the one that I think really defines this new era, was the peace sign incident in February of last year.
This was visceral. An influencer, a young guy, asks for a selfie after a show. Seinfeld smiles, leans in. Then the guy throws up a peace sign and says, "Free Palestine."
And Seinfeld's face just drops. The mask comes off completely.
He shakes his head and says, point blank, "I don't care about Palestine," and walks away.
I don't care. Not, it's complicated. Not, I disagree. Not, I support Israel. Just, I don't care.
It was blunt force. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a performance. It was a dismissal. And that's what people reacted to. And then he doubled down. In September, back at Duke University for an event, he took it even further. He compared the Free Palestine movement to the KKK.
KKK, I mean, that's not a comparison you can walk back from.
He characterized the movement as fundamentally anti-Semitic and then said the KKK was at least honest about their hate, implying the protesters were hiding their anti-Semitism behind political slogans. That is a massive, massive leap from, "What's the deal with airline peanuts?"
It really is. It's a shocking evolution. He went from the guy who unites everyone in laughter about small, universal annoyances to the guy who divides everyone with one of the most contentious issues on the planet.
And I think it connects back to what we discussed in the beginning, his need for control and his black and white view of the world.
How so? Explain that connection.
Think about the sign painter. Think about the billionaire who walked away from NBC because the show wouldn't be perfect. Think about the guy who had to have Frankie the mail boy fired because the script wasn't right. Seinfeld has a rigid black and white view of the world. There is a right way to tell a joke. There is a right way to build a car. And in his mind, there is a right side and a wrong side to this conflict. There's no room for gray area.
So the same trait that made him a genius, that uncompromising standard, that refusal to see shades of gray, is what makes him so polarizing now.
I think so. He doesn't do nuance. He doesn't do hugging and learning. He does clarity. And in comedy, clarity is hilarious. In geopolitics, that same kind of absolute clarity can look a lot like intolerance, depending on where you stand.
That is a profound way to look at it. We always want our heroes to evolve with us, don't we? We want them to update their software. But maybe Seinfeld is successful specifically because he doesn't update. He is who he is. He stays in his lane.
He is the master of his domain. Even if that domain is now surrounded by a culture that's fundamentally changed, he built an empire on nothing, on observing the minutiae of life. But his recent years show him grappling with very heavy, very real-world somethings.
It creates a real dilemma for the fan, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Can you separate the art from the artist when the artist is telling you pretty directly that he doesn't care what you think about these big issues?
It's the classic question. And honestly, Seinfeld doesn't seem to care if you struggle with it. He has his cars, he has his coffee, and he has his billions. He has built a fortress of nothing that he hopes can keep the something out.
Well, that is certainly something to chew on. From the sign painter's son in Brooklyn to a man with 150 Porsches who is now fighting with college students about the Middle East. It's been a wild ride.
It certainly has. A true deep dive.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Does Seinfeld's rigid adherence to his own rules of comedy, his own personal operating system, make him a timeless craftsman, a master of a lost art? Or does it inevitably put him at odds with the evolving culture, making him a relic, however wealthy and successful?
A great question.
And that's our deep dive on Jerry Seinfeld. We'll catch you on the next one.